Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Do you believe in astrology? There are people who swear by it and people who think it has no real meaning at all. Well, today we're going to look at the nature of astrology and how it can help people and how it has helped a particular person by the name of Linda Moonrabbit, that's her nickname, Zlotnick, a professional astrologer and a twin who lost her twin sister at way too young an age and has used astrology to help her deal with that tragic loss, as well as the loss of her mother at the age of 17, which is awfully young to lose a mother. So, welcome, Linda Moonrabbit Zlotnick. And your nickname is Moon, I understand.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Duffy. Yes. Once I started doing astrology, I felt like I needed a new name, and that was the name that came to me. So,
very, very creative. So astrologists find meaning in cosmic patterns because everything is connected and we're all part of the world and the solar system we live in. And how is it that you became a professional astrologer?
Well, I think it was part good fortune and part feeling called. So when I was in college, I was looking for meaning and looking for answers. And as you mentioned, my mother hadn't been dead very long, and I was extremely confused. And someone who knew someone who was another college student was doing astrology readings. And so I volunteered to get my chart read. And there were a couple of things that she said to me that were so outside the scope of anything that I could have possibly imagined that I thought, I've got to study this. And it was very hard to find much of anything to study back then, I'll tell you. I went to the library where there was one book, but I did find a couple months later, I found a bookstore with an astrology section in it. It was the late 70s, so things have changed a lot since then.
Oh,
but
yes.
I basically taught myself and practiced on friends just like, my college friend was doing. And it just kind of turned into then being my full-time business.
Wow, that's wonderful. So we know that astrology doesn't cause events, but holds up a mirror so we can see events in our lives more clearly. How have you noticed that having one's astrology chart read is helpful to people?
Well, it's helpful in so many ways. So people, I think, come in on one level just looking for affirmation.
Oh.
So, we're just really complex human beings, and astrology has what I think of as a very unique, non-judgmental language to give people insights into who they are and why they're so complex. And even sometimes what they can do to kind of bring a little bit more balance or peace into their lives. So that's like a starting point. I would say most people come to see me for an annual forecast. And just like the weatherman doesn't always get it right predicting the weather, astrologers don't always get it right, but we are able to talk about patterns, and particularly patterns that repeat. And people who've been coming to see me for 30 and 40 years say that, it gives them like a heads up, or it gives them kind of an extra way of being prepared.
Extra way
for
of
what's
being,
coming.
Yeah, extra way of being prepared, almost like a blueprint in a way. perhaps. And isn't the astrology chart, though, very, very subject to interpretation?
Yes, right. And it's getting more standardized than it ever has been before. There are now certifications that astrologers can go through and basically get, certified. But yes, everybody, and there are many different lenses that people look at astrology through, but everybody brings, I think you can only bring as much wisdom as you have in your own life into interpreting somebody else's chart. So everybody brings their lens, they bring their degree of wisdom, they bring their degree of consciousness. All of that affects the outcome of the reading. And
you wrote in your book, again, Linda Moonrabbit Zlotnick, Zlotnick. Your book is entitled Star Sisters, an astrologer's memoir of twin loss. So you were a twin, and you lost your sixth sister when she was 56, I believe.
That's correct.
And you lost your mother when you were 17, when you and your twin sister were 17. And you talk about how astrology actually helped you be able to deal with your mother's death at the tender age of 17.
Yes, and in a much deeper way with my twin death.
Yes.
More closer to middle age. But going back to where we were about me studying astrology in my 20s, I did a lot of searching, initially to see if I could understand why she died. And there is something in my birth chart. So you use the word blueprint, and I think that's a really excellent word for the birth chart. Mm-hmm. So there is something in my birth chart, my twins' birth chart, that symbolizes early mother loss. And that was, in fact, what the college astrologer said to me. She said, "Oh, it looks like something, really hard happened in your family right around when you were the age of 18." And, I just couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Because something had. So, before my sister got ill, before we knew she was ill, I was aware of the fact that this big separation was showing up in my chart. And it was a separation showing up in the primary relationship part of the chart. And I thought, well, primary relationships, that means the person that I'm in this long-term committed relationship with. But then as soon as my twin called and said she was in the hospital, it clicked differently, primary relationship, because twins, even though, we have spouses and partners, and in my case, a wife, our twinship, is, at least for us, was always the primary relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, seeing that in my chart, and then having her get sick, it fused with my understanding of being part of a cosmic plan.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And the planet that has to do with separation also has to do with individuation and autonomy. And, I was forced in a kind of brutal way to become my own person, which I couldn't really be. We lived in the same city. We both were in helping professions. We had a lot of the same friends. It's very, very hard to be autonomous when you have somebody who resembles you in so many ways.
Wow. I don't know. The statistics must be very, very small of people who are twins, and I've never really studied it. I haven't known anyone personally in any depth who are twins, but I do imagine it's a very, very, very special circumstance with its own joys and its own challenges.
I think, each twinship is different, but the common theme that I know from being part now of a group of twins who've lost their twins is that you have to recreate an identity.
Wow.
Because being a twin is such a huge part of your identity from the time that you're born.
Wow.
And I think that twins develop these interdependencies because you always have somebody to play with growing up. And, you're just at that same development stage of life pretty much all along. So it's like a sibling relationship, but if you're identical genetically, then it's far more than a sibling relationship.
Yes, and I see twins who dress alike, and I see twins who dress differently.
Right.
And I imagine that is a decision that one makes. Yes.
We were dressed alike until we got into junior high, and I think that both of us were really happy to not be having to do that anymore.
So did you say to your parents no more, or did they say
no,
we don't have to, like we're done with that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you find that you had a very similar personality in some ways, and then of course not.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course not.
Right.
And in all twinships, there is a kind of firstborn and secondborn, or we talk about, well, she was the strong one, or he was the dominant one, or so there is often a more kind of leadership twin and a more of a following twin.
Oh, isn't that interesting? And also, isn't it funny if one is born 5 minutes before the other, they are the older sibling their entire life. That is really funny, when you look at it in a larger context. But hence the power of hierarchy and birth order.
Yes, exactly. The birth order in twins is the same as in other siblings.
Yeah.
Which, I think that's quite remarkable.
It is remarkable. So tell us more about how you're not only being an astrologer, but a professional astrologer, helped you deal with the loss of your twin sister.
So astrologers are always very obsessed with timing events. And it sounds, I think, maybe to an average person like very, very strange, but I was there, at my sister's bedside when she died. And as soon as she stopped breathing and her heart stopped beating, I looked at my watch. And I knew I would be creating a horoscope for the moment of her death. So it took some time, but I created a horoscope, and it took me 12 years of studying it to really have what I felt like was enough perspective or insight into kind of my evolution because of losing her. So I then practiced on a lot of people who had been coming to see me for years, doing death charts for their parents, or some of them for their siblings, or a couple of people for their spouses. And now part of the work that I do with people is I do something called death charts. And it's with an eye to helping people who are in grief, because everybody at some point goes through a loss of some kind, and grief is a very, very difficult emotion to get through.
Absolutely.
And people feel guilty, they feel remorseful, they feel angry. I mean, there's just such a kind of overwhelm of I could have done more, I should have done more, why didn't I do this? And I even had some of that with my twin because I knew she wasn't looking very well. Mm-hmm. And she was making all these excuses, and, part of me was like, why didn't I insist that she go to the doctor? And so I think in the larger cosmic picture now, I understand it wouldn't have made any difference. But feeling guilty and remorseful is a terrible burden. And so if I can even lift that for one person, that's kind of become part of my mission now as an astrologer, to really help people
that's wonderful.
See the spiritual part, the part that really, I believe that this trauma, this traumatic loss of my twin, really pushed me into another stage of my personal evolution.
Boy, it makes such sense. And Linda Moonrabbit Zlotnick, we always hear of the astrology chart from one's birth date and specific time of birth. And I never knew that there was such a thing as a death chart. And is this something new to you that you kind of created on your own?
In part, yes. So astrologers have studied deaths of famous people, looking to see, was there a sign in the heavens that would show that people were going to die? Okay? But as far as I know, I'm the only person who is using the death chart as a way to help counsel people who are going through terrible grief. So
tell us.
I'm writing now that I wrote the memoir. I'm starting to write a book on it, so astrologers will have some of the tools that I've developed from doing it.
So tell us what a death chart. Obviously, to the person themselves, the death chart would not be useful, but to the people who are the survivors, how can they be comforted by that?
Yes. Okay. So I'll give you a couple examples. Okay. So I was just doing a consultation for a woman whose brother had died of heart failure. And she was blaming herself because on the day that they had the appointment with the heart specialist, that was the day that he died. And she felt like, why didn't I hurry and why didn't I insist? And, all the things that people question themselves about. And I don't quite know how to explain this to somebody who doesn't understand astrology, but there was something in his chart 6 months earlier that was an indication that he was already so frail. And then on that day, even if he had gotten to the hospital or they had tried to do some kind of surgery, it was really, really clear that he couldn't have survived. Wow. He was already in such a sickened state. And so this enabled her to really feel much less overwhelmed with the guilt that she was feeling. And her next 2 years promised just this unbelievable kind of freedom in her life. And the longer we talked, the more it came out that their mother had died when he was 8 and she was 12, and so she'd always kind of been his parent, and then he was very sick. And something really changed when I talked to her about feeling this incredible sense of freedom in her future, and without diminishing how much she loved her brother. Do you know what I'm saying? Because she also had children, and so there was this extra burden that she carried, not only from having to raise him because the father disappeared, but from having, being the person who basically was a caregiver. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but there's one other thing I want to say, and that is for people who can't be there. So I feel really fortunate that I was able to be there, and, I saw my twin die a really peaceful, very, I would say spiritually awake kind of death. But I know people who don't get to their loved one's bedside, and something that's so fascinating about the death chart is that it talks a little bit about that experience of that moment, and people will go very, very gently into that moment. People will go into that moment really angry. People will go into that moment fighting. They'll go into that moment very spiritually. I mean, there's all these different signatures that I'm beginning to understand about that moment.
So interesting, because I often think of people who are dying as as virtually unconscious. We tend to drug people for pain, so they're already doped up on morphine. And you're describing, though, a very sharp consciousness at the point of death and pre-death, that there's a kind of like a preamble to it.
Well, so my sister was in a coma, So, but here's the thing that made me believe very firmly that she wasn't gone, is that whatever that connection was that we always had, I could feel it until her heart stopped beating. And then it was like something that had always been part of me snapped, and I described it in my book as it flew out the window. It was like this breaking and then this disappearance of an energy that had always been in me, a kind of consciousness or connection, really.
Wow. And then you found her again in your dreams.
Yes. I feel really fortunate, and I know many twins have, these what we call visits. So, there are dreams where, you're like, I have a lot of dreams now about my twin. She's just in my everyday, like, the regular stuff that you dream about, driving and doing things. But, there were a few visits after she died where we just had a regular conversation.
Really?
Yes, it was absolutely a bona fide conversation where I said to her, like, I've missed you so much. Where have you been? And she said, I'm so sorry. Time is really different where I am now. And it was like so reassuring to hear.
Oh, my word.
She hadn't forgotten about me. It was, of course, time is different in, when you're in this whatever it is.
Now, was this while you were awake, or was this in your dream?
No, I suppose you could say that I was having a lucid dream.
Yeah.
So I was definitely in bed asleep.
Yes.
But it was so real. It was absolutely 100% as real as anything that I've ever had as an awake person.
Got it. So you specify that as a lucid dream.
Yes.
Yes, that's a good demarcation. Yeah. And what else did she say about the sense of time?
Oh, we didn't get to talk very much because then she did this healing on me. It was pretty amazing. So, this part, you're really in a dream, right? But these beings of light appeared with her, and they all started like oming, and then we went into this separate room, and they all were doing stuff on my aura, and she was holding my head. And so when I woke up from the dream, I felt like really, really different than I did. Up until that point, I just was so bereft because I couldn't. I felt that she was so absent.
Yes. And after that, she felt.
And after that, I had more dreams. And in the dream, she was maybe not always quite so specifically available for a conversation, but now I feel her very, very present.
But you knew her to be more present. And yes, the oming, and om is the universal sound. And I have read, and I don't know if this is true, but that the universe actually makes a sound, and it makes the sound of om.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that it's something about the motion in the universe, that is the sound of the universe. Om.
Wow.
Yeah, I liked it too when I read it. How people know these things, or think or learn these things, I do not know. But I like that, and I like saying om very much, and I like knowing that it is kind of the universal